Welcome, everyone. I make that 5:30, and welcome officially to the late shift. I do appreciate everyone turning out. It's getting pretty late, and I know the parties are kicking off soon as well. So I'll introduce myself in just a moment, but we're going to be talking about composable platforms and patterns that work and patterns that don't. I like to start my talks with kind of high-level takeaways. Also, this time of night kind of primes you what I'm going to be talking about. If you're not interested, I will not be offended if you walk out as well. This will give you an overview. I'm going to pitch that composition is valuable in all three layers of building platforms: the app, kind of the UX layer, the portal layer, the core platform, and the infrastructure layer. I'm going to say that each layer, or each teams looking after the layer, must own their flow of value. This is key in composition. And when we come to look at sort of metrics around how this is going to work, or how good a platform is, we're going to think about speed, safety, efficiency, and scalability. Composability, composition, is all about APIs, abstraction, and automation. I've got a software engineering background. This comes naturally, I think. For many platform engineers, many ops folks I work with, this doesn't come naturally. But again, I've learned much from them. It's a two-way street, right? And finally, I'm going to argue many times, build your platform as a product. This is my core pitch today, really. And something my career, I've really seen the benefit of doing. Just very quickly, this is me, at Daniel Bryant UK on most of the interwebs, LinkedIn, GitHub, all the places. I've had a 20 or so year career, starting as a Java developer back in the day for the UK government, hence the accent. I've gone through all different roles: architect, CTO, built a few platforms. First, I was using Heroku, then I was doing raw compute kind of primitives, went to Mesos, and ultimately to Kubernetes. I've made a bunch of mistakes building platforms, leading teams building platforms, and I've learned a few things, hopefully, along the way. I love writing, love sharing my knowledge, written a few books, worked on open source projects. Just recently, with the awesome team at Syntasso, where I'm currently working, we have published an O'Reilly report about platform as a product. I'll mention a few sort of things from it along the way, but come along to the booth tomorrow. If you do want a copy, happy to hook you up with one of those. Let's set the scene. Platform engineering is still very, very hot, right? Gartner, about 2 or 3 years ago now, put this diagram out. I like this diagram, talking about platform engineering, how they see platform engineering. And they're predicting by next year, actually, a good chunk of folks are going to be spinning up platform engineering teams. I think AI might have derailed that a little bit. I'm seeing mindshare, budget, projects kind of spinning more towards AI now. But you still need a good platform to deliver AI capabilities, right? We'll come back to this diagram in just a moment. It's hot, but there are challenges. Just looking on Reddit, right, I see a bunch of, my portal's not working. I see the kind of, I built this platform, developers aren't using it, help me understand why. All the way through to the existential, am I a bad platform engineer or just a bad platform engineer at this company? And my heart went out to this person when I read this on Reddit, right? Fundamentally, I think there's a few patterns here. One is like putting a portal on top of something and thinking we're doing platform engineering. Not negging on Backstage. I'm going to shout them out. Love Backstage. Spotify have done amazing work to the community, right? But I do think we're a bit tempted with the hype sometimes to just go, I'm using a portal, I'm all good. When building a platform, first rule, got to talk to your customers. These are the developers. So many platform initiatives I bump into, they're not talking to developers, not understanding what they're actually building. And finally, kind of the existential thing, when I dove into this and read the thread, I think this is really about sort of misunderstanding the transition from DevOps to platform engineering. In my mind, when I was a DevOps engineer, I was doing a lot more tool-based stuff. And the transition to platform engineering was releasing a platform as a product, giving composable building blocks rather than just a bunch of tools and a bunch of consultancy. That's the kind of the mindset, I think. Let's come back to our diagram here. I really do like this diagram. The way I think about platform engineering now, many folks, I think, Camille Fournier and Ian Noland in their awesome book, Platform Engineering. I know Keith Morris on Infrastructure as Code thinks about it in a similar way. There's 3 key layers to the architecture. And this is kind of how I hope it comes out all right, how I overlay them there. You have sort of the app layer, the UX layer, the core platform layer, platform orchestration, and the infrastructure layer at the bottom there. The key thing, like Colin Humphreys, our co-founder, CEO of Syntasso, really helped me see this, is the key to a good platform is that teams responsible for those layers must own their flow of value. What I experienced when I was sort of dealing with platforms that didn't quite work is I realized I was dipping into different layers. As a developer, I was having to learn Terraform, Crossplane. Now, I quite like that. I just like learning stuff, right? But when I was consulting to big companies, many developers just wanted to write business logic. I'm happy writing Node. I'm happy writing Java. Why are you making me learn Terraform? Why are you pushing me into the infrastructure layer, right? And I was like, totally get it. That's totally fair. Team topologies. I'm lucky enough to know Matthew and Manuel, buddies from the UK. They have done amazing work in this space. If you have not read Team Topologies, particularly the second edition just out, it is an amazing book. And they talk about platform teams, platform groups. They've evolved their thinking, offering everything as a service. This is the book I wish I'd written. It is fantastic, right? Absolutely fantastic. And they talk about developers owning their flow of value, being able to put stuff together, rather than a golden path, giving them golden bricks to assemble their own golden path. Because often golden paths become golden prisons, golden cages, call it what you will, right? I found this with Heroku. Freaking amazing tool, but for certain organizations where we scaled too large, we couldn't customize it in the way we needed to. So we moved off. Again, Heroku, fantastic tool, but there was kind of rigidity there that I couldn't, at some point get past. You need to own kind of that flow of value, like say in the platform layer, be able to expose those components for your developers to assemble, and same with the infrastructure layer, sort of expose those components that developers can, or platform engineers in this case, can assemble to create the platform. And this, I think, is the layer that gets missed, this sort of platform layer. And the folks at Gartner called out it's a socio-technical system, right? It's not just tech. There is an element of people, for sure, and that's the hard stuff, right? That is the hard stuff. This next slide, bit of an eye chart, I appreciate. I actually did a whole talk pretty much on this at Salt Lake City last year. So don't worry about parsing all of this. You can go back, you can have a look at this. But this is kind of a breakdown of those three layers I talked about, the application choreography, we've called it, platform orchestration, and infrastructure orchestration at the bottom there, right? It's a nice mental model. All models are wrong, some are useful, right? But I find this is a nice sort of model of understanding about building platforms. Each team must own their flow of value. I want to talk about that, I want to reinforce that. Developers should be able to compose bits to, dev environment. I want a Kafka here, I want a Postgres here, I want a Java build pack here. That's really quite nice. Platform teams should be able to compose from the infrastructure. I want some security rules here, some sneak scanning here, some OPA things here, some Kyverno things here. And they're served by the infrastructure team. And infrastructure folks are ideally bundling all their stuff as APIs as modules too, right? Here is where the platform as a product mentality fits in. If you build the platform as a product, I've seen magic happen. I really have at big orgs in particular. Take a quick pause. Why build composable platforms? I often I jump on calls at Syntasso with customers, with prospects, and a lot of stakeholders like, why build platforms as a product? Why build composable platforms? Totally fair question. In my mind, the benefits of composable platform architectures are fourfold. You get a fast time to market, because you've got the quick assembly and deployment of things, plug in together. You have increased resilience, because it's easier to understand, to chain, and maintain things. You get a cost efficiency, easier to upgrade one thing than sort of thinking about this monolith. It's almost microservices versus monolith, if you're familiar with that kind of pattern as well. And the scalability, that supporting evolution, that modular growth. Too many times on my sort of journey, we built some small platforms initially. We didn't really think thinnest viable platform. We just kind of built a little monolithic platform. We had to throw it away as we grew. We built another platform, threw it away as we grew. And I think there was potential to support evolution along the way, looking back. At its core, this is speed, safety, efficiency, scalability. If anyone's familiar with Gregor Hopper's work, I definitely tune my language depending on who I'm talking to. When I'm in the boardroom chatting to the C-level folks, I'm talking about speed, time to market, that kind of thing, right? When I'm working as an engineer, working with engineers, I'm talking about make it easy for me to do the right thing. Shift left, shift down, all that kind of good stuff. So I alter my language, but fundamentally it's speed, safety, efficiency, and scalability. These are the way we're going to look at some of the patterns later and some of the metrics we're going to use. If you want to know more, in the actual report we put together, we dove into this in a bit more concept, in a bit more detail, because a lot of folks are often asking us, how do I evaluate my platform? And again, we're sort of making this up in quotes, right? As in, we're based on our research, based on our chats, but things like measuring speed of time to deploy instances, safety as percentage of services running that are verifiably policy compliant, mean time to upgrade for efficiency, and mean time to add a service to the platform. Sort of how do you collaborate, how do you bring things together in the platform. We found this a useful model in working with customers building platforms, and I'm going to go into some of these metrics with the patterns. Composability impacts all of these capabilities values, right? Speed, you want to think API first, high automation, minimize handoffs, minimize delays, and think consistent lifecycle management. And for my sort of dev brain, this is the principle of least surprise. If one thing behaves a certain way, and I've got a very similar thing over here, it should behave in the same way. Platforms that catch me out is where it's almost whack-a-mole. I hit this mole and something else pops up, and I'm just like, what's going on? That's really hard. Safety is all about reusable, organization-specific and approved compliance components. We had a customer we worked with at Syntasso, like the security team loved us because they could put all this hard work they've been doing over the years, they could automate it all and put it in components. And they were like, oh, we wanted to do this for so long, but we haven't kind of had a framework on how to do this. So honestly, security folks can be your friends. I actually saw them smile in a few meetings. It was awesome, right? And like, it's really powerful once you get this kind of mentality in there. Efficiency-wise, upgrading as a fleet. This was a big mindset shift for me that, again, Colin, my boss's boss, ultimately helped me think about, is being able, once you've sort of vended, you've got a template, you've vended things, if you keep that connection back to the mothership, you can upgrade them really easy. And you can upgrade not only 1, but 10, 100 super easy. And scalability, we call this platform democracy, a term, again, we kind of coined, but like being able to have a multiplayer platform, make it super easy for InfoSec to get involved, for dev specialists, networking specialists, because a lot of people sort of feel left out, and platform adoption withers very quickly, in my experience with that. If you haven't got everyone being able to sort of democratically get involved with the platform, quite tricky. Let's move on to some platform patterns now. I'm going to give you 6 patterns grouped in sort of 3 ways. They're quite high-level patterns again, but just to get you thinking about this, kind of how perhaps I've made mistakes in the past, right, and how you can avoid and make new mistakes. The first one is, when I talk to people about composition, a lot of kind of DevOps folks are often like, I give people tools to compose the platform. I give them a build-your-own platform kit. I think you should do composable building blocks. This is my pitch, right? And I've literally called the anti-pattern is the DevOps tool dump. This is where you sort of go into an organization and they're like, here's Terraform, Helm, Argo, Vault, good luck. And you as a developer are thinking, what? Like, how do I get started, right? Every team ends up building their own mini platform. Don't get me wrong, I love the idea of DevOps. It is, the 3 ways, love the Phoenix project, seen it done well. I've seen it done very badly in some ways. And one of the anti-patterns with DevOps, you build it, you run it, is you have 10 teams and 10 platforms. Literally chatting to someone from the community last week, SRE had exactly that problem. He was like, I've got Postgres and every one is a snowflake. I don't know how to upgrade them all en masse. This is a real challenge. There's no shared standards, no upgrade path. This is a real tricky one. And if we look at that model of sort of speed, safety, efficiency, and scalability, I think speed, like, it can often be quite fast. If you're pre-revenue kind of startup, and I love working in those kind of startups, you can actually hire a bunch of really kind of senior folks. Here's your tools, have at it. You can actually go pretty fast, right? But you don't get that safety longer term, particularly as the platform grows. As you get 2 teams, I think the complexity might double, or it might, might sort of square or whatever. And as you get like 3 teams, maybe it's like times 3, or maybe it's even cubed. I'm not sure, but the complexity doesn't grow always linearly with the number of teams you get. You don't get that efficiency, that kind of like fleet management. You don't get a very good contribution model in my experience. What I think you really should aim for is this small set of reliable primitives. You want a few org-specific building blocks. So I'm going to re-emphasize this again. It's a big thing for composability. There should be like composable blocks, but relevant to your organization. Talk to your customers. Talk to your developers. Do you want a MySQL as a service? Do you want a database as a service? Do you want a test environment as a service? What abstraction do you want? Version the blocks. Semver is your friend. Please use Semver, major, minor, patch. Love it. Make them upgradable easily and make them combinable, composable. And this is where I think Backstage really rocks and portals really rock. Make those components discoverable. This is really, really key as well, right? With the right abstractions and automation, you do get that speed. That automation is key here. Minimize the handoffs, encode everything you can into the platform components. Safety is good. You do need this fleet management. You need to think a bit extra about how do I scale the safety out wide, right? And that's why I've sort of put a bit of a, oh, it's OK here, but there's potential work to do more things. And I think the same with scalability as well. You get a lot, if you sort of define maybe via CRDs, this is the API we're exposing in our platform, like Crossplane has this kind of vibe, right? Kratix I'm working on has this kind of vibe. And once you've got these kind of loose guardrails, like you're working with compositions in Crossplane, like we all agree on this, like we can contribute to the platform more effectively. As an example, I want to give a case study for each good version of this, so composable blocks. And slight irony, I'm going to talk about Lego, because it's like literally Lego the company. The cloud-native Nordics do amazing stuff, like just in general, but in Denmark, Lego are doing really good stuff. And I'm lucky enough to bump into them. I've chatted to their dev advocate who runs the platform team there. And this article by Jen Riggins on the New Stack is a great, great read. They talked about they had real challenges onboarding developers. They couldn't discover what the platform offered. There was no automation or limited automation in the components in the platform, and it was unclear ownership. And they went for a bunch of stuff, and they made the platform's components exposed via APIs, made the data exposed via APIs. And like Jen actually calls it out, like APIs and internal developer platforms are really, really useful here. They ended up creating something they call Baseplate. So there's a Platform Engineering Day London talk that Mads and colleague did about how Lego have augmented Backstage. So it's basically Backstage, but a baseplate is like the Lego baseplate, as we all as kids we probably built on, right? Like they've called it Baseplate, but it's basically Backstage modified. But I love that discoverability. So if you want to know more about composable building blocks for the platform, it's with no irony I say the Lego company is really good at doing this. The second group, policy in Confluence versus policy in the runtime. Now, I've seen a lot of folks start with good intentions, particularly highly regulated environments, highly regulated companies. They do sort of docs-based governance, thou shalt. The danger with this is it becomes a golden path wiki that no one reads, or the platform team end up becoming gatekeepers. Or I'm going to check off here. I'm going to every service I've got to look at, every instance I've got to look at, right? And that slows everything down. The killer, when you get to a certain scale, is the drift in particular. It's like, I love GitOps, right? And GitOps at the app level is great. If you don't have it at the platform level, you just get natural drift in compliance. You get exceptions, manual reviews. That's the killer. The manual reviews is really bad. Clearly, you don't get speed with that kind of thing, right? You do get safety at the start. That's why it's tempting, right? Because like when there's only a small platform and a highly engaged platform team, they can be the department of no. They can be like, ooh, let me scrutinize that. And it can actually be quite safe. Thing is, you don't get anything done. That's the trade-off, right? As you scale, that efficiency is really hard. That contribution model is non-existent in this kind of situation. What I recommend aiming for is governance as code. And we've got all the tools. I'll mention some in a moment. We've got CNCF is great in this space, right? Compliance baked into the delivery path. Do not make it optional in some circumstances, right? The evidence should be machine readable. The auditors love this in particular in finance space, because a lot of stuff they're reading through logs, and it's like, oh, what? But if you make it parsable, understandable, machine readable, it makes their life much easier. There's plenty of great components. I've used OPA a whole bunch, Kyverno, I know, Sneak, Aqua. There's many things that are, you can create relevant to your business, composable security modules. I want to run this OPA policy to check these things, Kyverno, etc. I want to run Sneak to verify there's no ports open or whatever, or the dependencies are all good. It can slow you a little bit down where you're kind of getting your head around this kind of thing, but you do get that safety and it scales out. And the scalability here, the efficiency is really quite nice. I would just caution, as I mentioned it already, but getting all the teams involved early is really, really important. I learned this lesson the hard way 10 years ago, consulting to a big e-commerce place in London, where we did this great platform. We did talk to the customers. It was really good. We were kind of danger close to rolling it out, and then InfoSec popped up. It was like one of those comedy movies where I was like, hello, no. And we were like, oh. And then we realized it was our fault for not consulting with the InfoSec folks earlier. This is how we intend to deploy things. This is how we intend to audit things. And they quite rightly pushed back. So other projects we did after that, every time we went, can we speak to your InfoSec team? Can we speak to your DevSecOps team? Whatever you want to call them. Can we speak to the security folks straight away? Buy them a coffee, have a chat. What's your biggest challenge? If you can get some wins there, really, really valuable. As an example, in this space, for the policy and runtime, I want to shout out the Wix folks. So I've been a long-term Wix user for creating websites, right? Really quite good. I'm lucky enough to know the VP of engineering there, Avrin Mordo, awesome character. And he talked about how Wix, over the years, have built this platform as a runtime. And it's kind of a serverless platform with also componentized bits and pieces in it. And within it, they have codified all of their policy. And one example I want to pull out, and I appreciate this is probably very small and a lot of text, but in the UK, we have GDPR regulations. I know in California, CCPA, I'm sure that's spreading across the country as well. Same kind of vibe. But if I say, as an end user, delete my data, you must be able to prove you have deleted me from the system. And developers used to sort of write, various custom logic, listening to queues for messages, and I delete this stuff in a database. But they have codified this throughout the stack, throughout the app, platform, and infra, where developers now have an SDK. They annotate the fields, PII, personally identifiable information, and then there's no need to subscribe to a queue. There's no need to even deploy a queue. This is done for you. It listens to the Kafka topic with messages coming in. It automatically deletes that data. There's a whole lot went into it. I'm glossing over it, right? But Avron's talk at QCon was really good. This article is really good about how do I bake componentized policy into the runtime. Final group of patterns, puppy for Christmas versus platform as a product. The puppy for Christmas, we all love our puppy for Christmas, right? The challenge is, once you've got the puppy, it's great on the first day. Everyone loves a puppy, right? Next day, you're out walking the puppy. Third day, the puppy is like made a mess, to say politely, in the corner of the room. You're like, oh. Next day, you're taking the puppy to the vet. Like a puppy is a commitment, is what I'm saying, right? Same when you give folks Terraform templates. The first day, we're all excited, right? We're like, oh, I've got Terraform templates. And then a 0 day happens, and like people are reaching out, and like, you've got to maintain that as a developer. And you're like, what, do I alter the values YAML file? They're like, no, 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 you're in the HCL today. And you're like, what? It can get pretty scary pretty fast, right? Same with Helm. Love Helm. Again, not being negative. I was a HashiCorp ambassador for a while. I love Terraform. I love Helm. But like, I've been there on the flip side where it's all got a bit messy, where I've given templates out and then just like have at it, right? There's no owner, there's no upgrade, no guarantees. Like no shirt, no shoes, no service kind of vibe, right? It gets a bit messy fast. The day 2 is what kills you. You get the drift, the patches, like that story I told where that person had 10 different teams, 10 different ways they deployed Postgres. Absolute nightmare. They had 10 puppies there, right? It was really, really hard to fix that stuff. The danger with this is it's quite seductive early on. And sometimes it's the right thing to do. If you're going a startup, no product market fit, pre-revenue, like you want to go as fast as possible. Hire smart folks, keep it tight, move it fast, right? But when you get to a certain scale, that doesn't really doesn't fly. You lose that safety very early on. You can sort of get that efficiency because when everyone's happy, like when the templates are new, they kind of work and everyone's kind of comfortable. You know, they're all Terraform experts. It's great. But people start revolving off the team, they leave the company or whatever, the knowledge is gone, it gets messy pretty quickly. And again, I think the actual scalability thing like works quite well if everyone is an expert and the team is super tight. So I'm not negging too much on this pattern. If you're a startup, this actually can be quite the way to go, right? But if you're not a startup, I would definitely lean more into this whole platform as a product mentality. Many folks have written about this. Definitely not claiming I've coined the term here. Like, it's some great work. Like I know some folks at VMware, Cloud Foundry have talked about it for years. Colin, who's my boss's boss, and Joe and a few other folks from Pivotal back in the day have talked about this a lot. But you offer capabilities of the platform as versioned products. It's that mindset change, right? You're offering the component as a product that there's a clear customer, clear end user. Each component has an owner, an SLA, and a life cycle. Make it sort of easy to do the right thing, make it understandable who owns things. And ideally, you want to be able to chain the ownership up. Like the database owner is here, combine these things into an application service, that's got an owner too, and then maybe have an environment as a service, that's got an owner too. The ownership thing is a little bit hierarchical, turtles all the way down, but it's really, really important. When stuff goes wrong, you need a clear owner to communicate down. You know, you take sort of responsibility, then it might not be you actually fixing it, but you're the owner, so first line, you can cascade down through the hierarchy. Big thing for me, I love Argo, for example. I did a lot of work on Argo, Flux as well, but mainly Argo back in the day. And for me, that reconciliation was a magical thing, right? I avoided drift, it would bring it back into line. Great for applications, great for platforms too. If you can make that sort of reconciliation happen at the platform layer, it's magic. You do have to make a lot of your components idempotent to do this though, because you're constantly rerunning them, right? And if you've got empirical code or whatever running, it's very easy to create side effects and things like that. So that's a lesson we've definitely learned and expounded at Syntasso. All of our sort of promises, our building blocks, that we say to folks, make them idempotent, because they're going to be reconciled every 10 hours by default in our product, but other products do similar kind of things. If you minimize the approvals, the handoffs, you get the 3 thumbs up, or 3 ticks, I should say. If you engage the InfoSec folks early, you get the safety, get them bought in. They are customers, they are stakeholders in this, right? Get that GitOps++ mindset. You're not just GitOpsing the applications, you're GitOpsing the whole platform. And if you haven't bumped into GitOps, many great articles out there. Alexis, I think, is actually kicking around the conference. Have a chat to Alexis and Brian. I bumped into Brian earlier on. So that would be really, they're doing some great work at Config Hub as well. And finally, if you embrace things like inner source, my friend, colleague, Abby Bangzer has talked a lot about this. You'll see Abby on the keynote stage tomorrow, first talk of the day, super excited for that one. And Abby's done some great talks, some great panels about the value of inner sourcing. So if you get everyone on board, it's like applying open source principles to your tech. Very quickly, example here, I really like what the DoorDash folks did. They were really struggling with Kafka, right? Kafka, like offering Kafka as a big scale DoorDash. And they had a bunch of pains. I've just picked 3 there. It was like confusion with Terraform manual onboarding. When developers wanted to get hold of a Kafka, how did they do it? They had to sort of dive into the Terraform code, the HCL, difficult with debugging. The documentation was confusing, classic stuff. So the platform team there, the SRE team, got together and said, let's chat to the customers, understand what they want, and they built a self-service solution. And if you actually look, it's pretty much the 3 layers here. The blue at the top, like our app UX layer. The middle layer with the dashes is kind of my platform orchestration layer, and the bottom is the infrastructure layer. And they had crazy results, really good results. Right, apologies, it might be a bit small, but like they've got, like, I think, nearly 25,000 resources onboarded, which I think is roughly like topics in Kafka. And they had like an 80% reduction in loading time, reduced 99% from 12 hours to under 5 minutes for the average resource creation time. They thought about the API, put a bunch of automation in there. They did the hard work, right? Don't get me wrong, they did the hard work. The payoff was there. They also got a whole bunch of reliability benefits, as you can see down the bottom, in terms of enforcing best practices, baking in some of the policy, some of it optional, some of it not. But I just really like that blog post they put out. Really talks about platform as a product, building components, talking to developers, understanding what they wanted, and actually making it happen. And the results speak for themselves. Putting this all together, I appreciate it's almost party time, right? For composability to thrive, think about clear APIs and lifecycle management. This sounds kind of obvious for software developers in the room, but for many ops folks I've worked with, this is a learning journey for them. Got to bring them along. Teach folks about cohesion, loose coupling, that kind of stuff. Principle of least surprise definitely applies to the lifecycle management. GitOps is a really good model here, but think about versioning, idempotency, reconciliation, all that good stuff. Think about the correct level of abstraction for your organization. Early on in my platform journey, I was constantly reinventing AWS, pretty much, right? I was like, oh, you need a database. You need a blob storage. That developers didn't always want that. They wanted higher level primitives. So I still see folks reinventing IaaS. There's value in that at the infra level. Platform level should be higher level constructs. Building blocks for the layer is the key thing, as I do see folks like sort of leaking the flow of value. Developers are having to dip into Terraform. Folks maintaining databases are having to come up to figure out where things are deployed where, chatting to the developers. Infrastructure folks should be able to own their flow of value if the platform is composed in the right way. Components must be discoverable. Shout out to Backstage, shout out to Portals here. And final one, productize your services for the win. Those are my kind of keys for composability. Let's start with the 2 minutes I've got remaining, bringing it all together, wrapping up. I'm going to say to you, platform architecture, the 3-layer model has really helped me. It helps folks I chat to, folks I mentor, just think about that mental model, because platforms are big, right? There's lots going on there. Think about composition at all 3 layers. Each team must own their flow of value. Honestly, that was a magic thing for me when I suddenly cottoned on to this whole flow of value stream, and I was like, oh yeah, this is when I struggled. I did not own my flow of value, either as a developer or as a platform engineer. Good ways of measuring the impact of composability: speed, safety, efficiency, scalability. You might use different words depending on who you're talking to. These are your fundamental things. Composability, all about APIs, abstraction, and automation. If you're a dev, got dev background, do help sysadmins, help ops folks to think about these things. And finally, I know I've said it many times, but for me, like, it's a simple thing. It's just words, right? But treating your platform as a product, we're all really good at building customer products, but treating your internal tooling as a product is a massive mindset shift. I've really seen it work well when folks make that transition from kind of DevOps, which again, DevOps is very valuable, but moving to platform engineering, to platform mindset, they're building things as a product. At that point, I shall say thank you very much. Love the feedback. And come and find me in the booth tomorrow at Syntasso booth if you do want to grab one of the reports as well. I'd be happy to have a chat with you. Appreciate your time.